welcome to TMS Success. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about what TMS is and what we do here at TMS Success and some of the things that differentiate us from other TMS providers. So in order to start our discussion about TMS, I wanted to talk a little bit about depression and how the brain works, in particular how the brain works around depression. So in the United States, there are over 350 million people, sorry, that's worldwide. There are over 350 million people worldwide who suffer from depression. And here in Utah, in 2017, Utah had the highest rates of depression of any state in the United States. So depression is a huge issue that affects millions of lives. And if you personally haven't struggled with depression, chances are pretty good that you know somebody either very closely, personally, or in your family who does or has struggled with depression. And so many people that have struggled with depression and that do struggle with depression have really struggled to find adequate treatment and adequate relief from their depression. And TMS is a relatively new and mostly not very well understood, wonderful non-medication treatment for depression. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about neurotransmitters and how they work. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers in our brains that carry messages between cells in our brains and in neurons in particular, and they are responsible for motivation, happiness, memory recall, focus, sleeping, all kinds of things are associated and with neurotransmitters and dependent on those chemicals being present in our brains. And so I wanted to talk about how the neurotransmission process works. This is a picture of this process, and then I'll break it down. But here you can see that you've got these neurons and messages being sent from one neuron to another one, and then this right here is a blow up of this broader picture. We have over 100 billion neurons in our brains and in our bodies. Just to give perspective of that, provide perspective to that, the Milky Way, I believe, has between 20 and 40 billion stars. And so if you think about how many stars there are, and then think that inside us we have 100 billion neurons. And so this happens all over and at a very microscopic level, but I'm going to break down exactly how it works. And so this is a blow up of that, and then I'm going to break down this blow up picture here as we go into the next screen. So you have this presynaptic neuron here, and within this presynaptic neuron you have several things that are going on, and then on the other side you have the postsynaptic neuron. And so what has to happen in order for messages to be able to be sent throughout our body is that messages need to be able to make it from one neuron to the next neuron. Even my ability just to raise my hand, that ability happens as messages are sent from my brain to all of the tendons and muscles from my brain down through my hand and out through my shoulder, and that ability to do that. Babies don't have the ability to do that because those neural pathways are not yet formed. And so in order for that to be able to that process to be able to happen, the messages have to be able to be sent from one neuron to the next. Again, billions of neurons. So this has to happen in order for our brains to work well. So neurotransmitters, these little chemical messengers, are housed within a neuron in little membrane sacs that are called vesicles. And an electrical pulse signals this neuron to release the the chemicals. So we'll just say, we'll talk about serotonin. So an electrical pulse signals this presynaptic neuron to release the serotonin. So when that happens, these little membrane, the vesicles come up and they kind of give way and they release the serotonin into this space between the two neurons. It's called the synapse. And so the serotonin is released into that synapse, where they are caught up by little receptors in this postsynaptic neuron and re-encapsulated in these little vesicles, and it awaits the next electrical pulse to be sent on through the brain. So that's how this process works. Again, this is just a color photo of that same thing, where you can see there's an electrical pulse, the nerve pulse signals this neuron to release the neurotransmitter, and then it's caught up on the postsynaptic neuron, and then another nerve pulse sends it on through the brain. Well, so electricity is the key here, because it's electricity that signals a neuron to release the neurotransmitter. This is a PET scan of a depressed brain over here on the left-hand side and a non-depressed brain. And so you can see that there is much more electrical activity going on in a non-depressed brain. And this darkest region right here is actually the area of the brain that is associated with the regulation of mood. So you can see that when somebody is depressed, there's very little electrical activity going on, and so that neurotransmission process is not functioning well in the brain, and so those neurotransmitters are not being carried through the brain. And so the functions that they perform, the memory, recall, the motivation, the concentration, the get up and go, those things we're unable to feel those things because those chemicals that make us feel those things are not being transmitted. So there's a blockage. The freeway isn't working well when we're depressed. And there are two types of neurotransmitters. There are excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And inhibitory neurotransmitters do just that. They inhibit nerve impulses and calm the brain and help create balance. So the main inhibitory neurotransmitters that we talk about are serotonin and GABA. And inhibitory neurotransmitters decrease the likelihood of something occurring. So they calm the system. They're just that. They inhibit something from happening. So they help us sleep well. They help us be able to relax and recall information. They're associated with many things. The kind of happiness that we get from inhibitory neurotransmitters is kind of a contentedness. Everything's okay. The world looks good. That's what inhibitory neurotransmitters do. Excitatory neurotransmitters do just the opposite. They increase what's called the action potential. And so whatever a cell does, excitatory neurotransmitters increase the likelihood of that event happening. So if it's a muscle, it increases the likelihood of the muscle firing. If it's memory recall, it increases the likelihood of that firing. Motivation, sex drive. Excitatory neurotransmitters increase the likelihood of something. Inhibitory neurotransmitters decrease the likelihood of that. And so in order for our brains to work well, we have to have a good balance between both excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. If that balance gets out of whack and there are too many excitatory neurotransmitters, then we tend to get anxious. If there aren't enough excitatory neurotransmitters and there aren't enough inhibitory neurotransmitters, then we tend to get depressed. And so in order for our brains to work well, there has to be a good balance between both the excitatory and the inhibitory neurotransmitters. So I just want you to see that in a depressed brain, there's either no or very little electrical activity going on. And so what happens is again, we'll just say serotonin. the neurotransmitter here doesn't get caught up or received by this postsynaptic neuron. And so what happens is the neurotransmitters float up here and they're reabsorbed into this presynaptic neuron. They get re-encapsulated and they get put back in queue. And so this neurotransmission process isn't going on. And so our brains get stuck and we don't get the benefit of the neurotransmitters. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about medication. So what medication does is, and the most common types of antidepressant medications are called SSRIs. And SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And so they go in here and they attempt to block the reuptake of the serotonin by blocking that reuptake site. And so the thought is that by default, the synaptic region gets flooded and the clogs get blown out of the way and the neurotransmitters are forced through. Which is great in theory, and antidepressants work for a certain percentage of the population. But part of the problem is that it's a manual or a mechanical workaround, and it's not how our brains naturally work. As you saw a minute ago, our brains, this neurotransmission process naturally works as a result of electrical activity, nerve pulses signaling this neurotransmission process. And so medications are kind of a workaround to try to work with that. Well, these were the results of antidepressant efficacy. This is a famous STAR-D study, a national study, and what it shows is that the first antidepressant that somebody uses works for about 30% of the population. 27.5% of the population experience remission of depression with their first antidepressant. Now, an important little caveat right here. The APA, the American Psychiatric Association's recommended treatment for major depressive disorder is first an antidepressant along with therapy. Then, if that doesn't work to provide sufficient relief, what the APA then recommends is TMS treatment now. I'm going to talk extensively about TMS in a second, but I just want you to know that TMS is the recommended treatment for major depressive disorder if insufficient relief has been obtained through one antidepressant trial and therapy. So about 9%, it's 8.6% of people stop using their first antidepressant due to negative side effects. Now, so right there is when ideally TMS treatment would enter the scene. But that's not normally what we do. Normally what we do is to prescribe a second antidepressant. And you can see that if the first one didn't work, the second one only works for about 20% of the population, and about 23% of the population stop their second antidepressant due to negative side effects. The third one only works for about 16% of the population, with over 35% of the population stopping due to negative side effects. And the fourth antidepressant trial only works for about 7% of the population, and over 40% of the population stop because of negative side effects or insufficient relief on the fourth attempt. So while antidepressants are a huge industry and do help many people, it's really not a very effective way for the treatment of depression for most people. So, depression has very predictable negative side effects for people in their relationships, in their careers and work. Many people who struggle with depression are unable to maintain a job, or they have a really difficult time performing their work functions, or they miss a lot of work due to their depression. Finances go hand in hand with that. Quality of life. Many relationships, many people that I've seen across the years, and also the patients that I've seen here at TMS Success report that they feel like they're not engaged with their families. They isolate. They spend a lot of time in bed, and they feel like they're kind of a wet blanket. They feel like they're kind of a drag on their home lives, and so those are the common areas where depression, the effects of depression are really felt. So TMS, what is TMS? TMS stands for Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And TMS, the great thing about TMS is that it helps the brain do what the brain naturally does. It uses a magnetic strength about the same as an MRI machine to provide electrical stimulus of the neurotransmission process. And so a coil is used that provides an electrical stimulus identified in the brain. It starts up here on the left prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain up here, and it goes back into the deeper regions of the brain, back on that slide that you saw showing the electrical activity, back into the deeper regions of the brain that are associated most heavily with mood regulation. And so it goes back into the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Because as you saw in that neurotransmission process, stimulating one and providing the electrical stimulus for one nerve, one neuron, then provides it for the next neuron and the next neuron and the next neuron. And so you end up with this domino effect where the neurotransmission process is occurring. Now, since TMS is providing the stimulus, it's very much like, well, I'll get to that in just a second because I'll show you the results. So, for whom is TMS recommended? If you're struggling with depression, likelihood is that you've tried many medications. Many people have tried alternative treatments as well with little or no success. And so TMS is really, if you've tried multiple medications and you've not found sufficient relief, then you really ought to give us a call and check into TMS and find out if it's right for you. So if you've not benefited from prior medication and you would like to consider a non-invasive treatment, TMS is something that you ought to look into. The only thing that disqualifies somebody absolutely for TMS is if you have metal in your brain. Of course, because there's providing some electrical pulses there, and metal can get in the way of that. Now, one quick question that a lot of people have is this ECT or electrical convulsive therapy? No, it is not. ECT is a very invasive. It does use electricity, but it is extremely invasive. When you go in for ECT, you are sedated, you're put to sleep, and then a seizure is induced to. It's like a hard breaker reset, turn it off and on to try to get the neurotransmission process working again. It comes with predictable short-term memory loss. It is effective in terms of getting the neurotransmission process going, but it's a very invasive treatment. TMS, you drive yourself to the office. TMS treatment, you come to the office every day for 6 weeks, so 5 days a week for 6 weeks. The treatment takes about 20 minutes, and during that 20 minutes, the neurotransmission process is stimulated 3,000 times. And so it fires the neurons 3,000 times. And so over the course of treatment, that neurotransmission process gets stimulated over 100,000 times. And so it really gets that process firing well. And in terms of efficacy, I want you to look at this. These are the results of national studies that have been done on the efficacy of TMS treatment. And you can see that at the end of 6 weeks, over 62% of people are experiencing positive benefits, experiencing results from the TMS treatment, with over 40% having complete remission of depression. which is really great. You can compare that to the 27% with an antidepressant that goes down across time. This is really great. And I was a practicing clinician for over 22 years, and I've worked with hundreds of people struggling with depression. And I have never seen anything that provides this kind of result. And that the thing that really got me interested in TMS is this number right over here. So a year later, without any additional treatment, the number goes up from 62 and 41 to almost 68% of people are still experiencing positive benefits, and 45% have complete remission of depression. And so the great thing about this is that our brains are designed to work. Our neurotransmission process is designed to function properly. And so what this shows is that once the brain gets going and is working well, it keeps working well. So I kind of think about TMS, I'm kind of a simple guy. I kind of think about TMS as almost like a pull on a lawnmower, or the starter on an engine. It gets the brain moving, and then once it's moving, the engine keeps going. And that's what TMS does, is it gets the brain going. So one of the things that that I get asked a lot is, so what if it doesn't work? And my response to that is that TMS can't not work for what it does. It absolutely gets the neurotransmission process going, because it's doing what the brain does. It's providing an electrical pulse to those neurons that stimulate the release of both excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. So it absolutely will do that. Ideally, during TMS, you also use the increased feeling better to make behavioral changes in your life that might be in the way or contributing factors for the depression in the first place. Our office here at TMS Success, first year of treatment, our numbers, 92% of our patients have experienced significant relief from depression. So 62% is awesome, but 92% is amazing. And that is due in large part to the great quality of staff that we have. The people that I have working for me are outstanding people and provide really great care. Time and time again, our patients report that they look so forward to coming in and being able to spend their 20 to 30 minutes with our staff. We're caring, we take time, we answer questions. When you come to treatment, you can listen to a podcast or listen to music, you can read a book, or you can visit. And most people here in our office end up visiting. You can also bring a loved one. But again, you come and you drive yourself here if you want to. You can drive yourself back, go right back to work. The last thing that I want to do is talk about the negative side effects of medication versus TMS. And if you've been on antidepressant medication, your likelihood is that you're very well acquainted with these negative side effects. But insomnia, headache, and migraine, blurred vision, dry mouth, fatigue, weight gain, nausea, GI or abdominal distress, sexual dysfunction, low. Those are all common side effects. And part of the issue is that when you take a medication, you can't target that medication just to your brain or just to this left prefrontal cortex. That medication goes throughout your entire body, and so that's why you end up with effects, negative side effects throughout the system, because it affects the entire system. With TMS, the only known or predictable side effect is some scalp pain or discomfort at the site, excuse me. And so during the first week of treatment, many patients report some discomfort, because those neurotransmitters are not used to firing. And so there's some discomfort as the brain gets used to that. Many people report that it kind of feels like a woodpecker on their skull there during the first week, and then after the first week, that goes away for almost everybody, and then there are no negative side effects. And so anyway, that gives you some insight into how TMS works, the differences between TMS and medication, how the neurotransmission process works. Hopefully that educates you a little bit on how our brains work and the importance. You've probably heard of serotonin and dopamine and these words that we hear, but hopefully now you understand a little bit more about how they work and what their relationship by most all major insurance companies. TMS was FDA approved 11 years ago, and so if you have health insurance, chances are that it is covered by your, and we here at TMS Success are approved providers with Select Health and Cigna and Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Aetna, all the major providers here in Southern Utah where we are credentialed with. And deductible, but outside of that, it is covered by insurance. So the good news, if you or a loved one suffers with depression, is that there are alternatives. You do not have to stay depressed. I had my own mom go through TMS treatment last year, and the effects have been wonderful. And I'm a firm believer. It's been so wonderful to see the effects for our patients. And so if you're depressed, this isn't a silver bullet. It doesn't make everything wonderful, but it absolutely gets your brain doing what needs to happen in order for the neurotransmission process to work. So please give us a call, send us an email. 435-218-6298 is our office number here. Our email is tmsofstgeorge@gmail.com. Our website is tmsofstgeorge.com. So please come in, give us a call. We'll set up a free screening to find out if TMS is a good fit for you, and you can start the journey toward feeling better. Check out some of our testimonials. We've had lots of patients come through who have experienced great results, and we provide a very intimate and wonderful experience here at TMS Success.